Welcome to Charts Today. It's Monday, the 6th of July, and we start by looking at the dollar. And this is the medium-term chart of the dollar index. We have got an upside target, but on the short-term chart, that's the chart that we're really watching for this week. We see that we had this big thrust, which has given that target, but we are still not yet activated, and we need to move above 101.70, 101.80 to activate that. And if we look at the long-term picture, it is still bearish below the clouds. So it's a very mixed picture for the dollar, which means the outlook for most other currencies is mixed as well. We're seeing the yen making 40-year highs, so that is significant. Sorry, the 40-year lows against the dollar making 40-year highs against the yen. And we can see that this, there's talk of the shorting the yen, but realistically, it's a very hard call in either direction. So, that's quite interesting. Shorting dollar yen is risky. We have a trend, and we've got mixed targets. So quite an interesting picture. And of course, this is creating issues for Japan. If we look at the bond market in Japan, this is a short-term chart. Those upside targets being met. We look at the 60-minute, the daily chart. We don't have any targets, but we are hitting new highs above 2.8%. Remembering that Japan is the most indebted nation in the world, this is going to create big waves if we see moves above 3%. So, and there was worries about this back in January when we were at 2.3%. We've got another 0.5% from there since. So, really quite interesting. If we take a look at markets, well, the US was closed on Friday, of course, for 4th of July, and we have got big upside targets on the NASDAQ. But if we look at the 60-minute chart, it has been a struggle through June, and we are in this consolidation phase. We need a new high above 30,800 realistically. We're seeing the futures today up though. The S&P future up 1/3%, and the NASDAQ future up 1%. So it does suggest we are going to open higher in the US. We're seeing the UK market up 0.5%. Pushing to new highs there, so that's looking strong, but we're yet to make a new all-time high, which is what we did back in February. We look at the DAX, we can see on the future that we are breaking higher, in fact, so that is quite interesting. That's on the future. On the cash, also just a little bit of a break higher there, so outlook in Germany quite strong. Japan is also looking strong on that weaker yen, so Japanese company earnings is going to improve. We look at the Sensex. This has been a weak picture, but we just are crossing the cloud. Maybe we are just starting to see the beginnings of recovery. We've got the higher low. We want to see a move above 79,400 for the higher high, and that would activate that upside target. The Aussie market was relatively flat overnight. We saw, we can see we're waiting to see which way we break on the daily chart. Hasn't been a great chart on that short-term 60-minute chart. Crude oil was looking bullish this morning, but we are seeing a little bit of a pullback, but is testing the cloud. Watch the shorter-term charts for that. And if we look at some of the commodities, sugar, that has actually pulled back from hitting that $15 level. Each time we have made a high on sugar, that has given us the next thrust target, so it's still too early to call this as a recovery. And if we look at coffee, that's down 2.6%. That had recovered back above that support level at around 280, so looking a little bit better there. Now, last week we talked about gold having found a floor. Quite interestingly, on the daily chart, we are still below the cloud. On the weekly chart, we are still above the cloud, although we do have a downside target. But the short-term chart was what was giving us some cause for feeling that maybe we're putting in a bottom. 3,950 is the level to watch. If we break below that, that's all bets are off for gold recovery. But we have seen 4,200 as a level where we have hit some resistance on the short-term chart. This is going to be an interesting one to watch this week. And 4,000 ideally needs to hold as a psychologically important level. Silver, no big surprises there. Also a similar picture. And if we look at the daily chart, the downside targets are a little bit more compelling than gold, so we do have to watch that. It's going to be interesting today seeing the tech majors. They had a fairly mixed session on Thursday. We had Tesla down 7.5%, so it'll be very interesting to see how they open today. And SpaceX is still finding its ground. This 50 IPO level is 150 IPO level is really quite key. We've got downside targets into the 130s. If we break below there, those targets start to look quite interesting. We won't look at the US market as it was closed on Friday. We covered it on Friday for Thursday. The big news in the UK market this morning is Easyjet. That's up another 10% with his bid being potentially approved. The upside targets were given back in May and June, and we've seen that rise from 350 to 600. So really quite consistent there. On the daily chart, there's a massive upside target that relies on a new bidder coming in. But even if we look at the long-term picture, it has been a sideways move for Easyjet over the last few years. So a little bit of respite there. Looking for long-term investors in Easyjet. Babcock not looking so good. We're just looking at the top performers. Relx is still an awful looking chart, even though it's up 3% today. BAE Systems, we're seeing some moves there, and St James's Place starting to recover. International consolidated airlines, which IAG Group, which is British Airways and Iberia, starting to look stronger on that Easyjet move. So that's been quite interesting as well. Burberry, still not a great looking chart, waiting to see if we activate that downside target. And London Stock Exchange, a lot of sort of volatility there. We are seeing JD Sports recovering, and Sage, software companies, hit globally really a bit lower. Pearson actually performing much better than Relx, but actually still no clear targets to the upside. And GSK up 1.3%. So that's quite interesting this morning, seeing that announcement on US tariffs for UK pharma. So that's it for today. Keep an eye on those targets. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with this Easyjet chart, but it looks like it's going to sit there until tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye for now.